I was never the kind of man who sought the spotlight. My idea of celebration was a quiet dinner, a bottle of wine, maybe some music in the background. But on the night of our 10th wedding anniversary, I found myself standing in front of more than 60 people. The glow of a projector washing over my face, my hands steady on the clicker. Everyone thought I was about to deliver a slideshow filled with pictures of me and my wife, Tessa, from the past decade vacations, holidays, milestones. They were half right. It started as a simple idea a month earlier. I wanted to surprise her. We'd been distant for a while, and I thought maybe a public tribute could bridge the gap. I booked the banquet hall in downtown Bozeman, sent out invitations to family and friends, ordered catering from her favorite restaurant. I even hired a local guitarist to play while guests arrived. On the surface, it was a grand romantic gesture. But by the second week of planning, everything shifted. I was in our kitchen late one evening, cleaning up after dinner. Tessa had left her phone on the counter, screen lit with a new message. I didn't mean to look, at least. That's what I told myself. But the words were impossible to ignore. Blake Morgan. Can't stop thinking about last night. You were incredible. It hit me like a punch to the chest. Blake wasn't just some random guy. He was a mutual acquaintance, someone I'd seen at community events, someone Tessa claimed to barely know. My first instinct was to confront her immediately, demand an explanation. But something stopped me. Maybe it was shock, maybe it was self-preservation. Instead, I slipped the phone back where she left it and acted like nothing had happened. The next few days, I watched her more closely. She smiled at me the same way she always had. But now I saw the gaps in those smiles, the little absences in her gaze. She spent more evenings working late, more weekends helping her sister. Her phone always face down. My mind kept going back to Blake's text, wondering how deep the betrayal ran. 2 weeks before our anniversary, I followed her. It wasn't difficult. Bozeman isn't a big city, and she had patterns. That Thursday, instead of going to the office like she claimed, she drove to a hotel on the outskirts of town. I sat in my car, half hidden behind a delivery truck, and watched Blake's black SUV pull up. Tessa stepped out, hair loose, wearing a dress I'd never seen before. She walked straight into his arms. I should have felt rage. I should have gotten out, shouted, ended it right there. But instead, I felt cold, detached. My mind was already moving ahead, building something. That night, I went back to the slideshow. The first half remained the same photos of our wedding day, our trip to Glacier National Park, the cabin we'd rented one snowy Christmas. But then, halfway through, I inserted the new images. Time-stamped photos of Tessa entering that hotel, Blake holding her hand in the parking lot, the text messages I'd screenshotted, their names clear on the screen. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents, not my friends, not even my sister, who could normally read me like a book. The secret sat with me, growing heavier by the day. On the night of the anniversary, the banquet hall was glowing with warm lights. Guests mingled, glasses clinked, the guitarist played softly near the corner. Tessa looked stunning black evening dress, hair curled, the same perfume she'd worn on our wedding day. She greeted everyone with the poise of a beloved hostess, completely unaware of what was coming. When it was time for the slideshow, I stood at the front, thanked everyone for coming, and made a short speech about love, commitment, and truth. I could feel Tessa's eyes on me, warm and expectant. I clicked the first slide. The room filled with smiles and soft laughter as the early photos rolled by, our honeymoon selfie, us hiking near Yellowstone, the Christmas morning we brought home our dog. I kept my voice calm, telling small anecdotes, letting the nostalgia pull everyone in. Then came the first shift. A photo of the Bozeman Hotel, time-stamped 2 Thursdays ago. A ripple went through the room. Next slide, Tessa and Blake in the parking lot, her hand on his chest. The murmurs grew louder. I could hear someone gasp. Tessa's smile froze, her glass of champagne trembling in her hand. I didn't stop. The following slides were screenshots of their texts. Nothing graphic, but enough to strip away any doubt. Words like last night, can't wait, miss you already. I read them aloud, my voice steady, almost detached. The room went silent except for the faint hum of the projector. Tessa's face went pale, her eyes darting around as if looking for an exit. Blake wasn't there. He'd turned down the invite with some excuse, but I could almost feel his shadow in the room. I clicked to the final slide. A simple white screen with black letters. Some truths are best kept private. This one wasn't. I let the words hang there for a moment before turning off the projector. My heart was pounding, but my voice was calm as I thanked everyone for coming. I didn't look at Tessa as I walked out. I didn't need to. The cold night air hit me like a wave as I stepped out of the banquet hall. My pulse was still high, but my mind felt strangely clear. I could hear the muffled voices inside, a blend of confusion, shock, and whispers. Some people would defend her, others would say I'd gone too far. I didn't care. That night wasn't for them, it was for me. I walked to my truck, parked a block away, and sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. My phone lit up almost immediately. First a text, then another, then a call. Tessa. I ignored them all. I just stared at the dark windshield, watching my own reflection. For the first time in months, I felt in control. By the time I got home, it was close to midnight. I left the lights off and poured myself a glass of bourbon. 10 minutes later, the sound of tires on gravel broke the quiet. Headlights swept across the living room as her car pulled in. The front door burst open. She was still in the black dress, makeup smudged, hair falling loose around her shoulders. "What the hell was that, Grant?" she demanded, her voice already shaking. I didn't answer right away. I sipped the bourbon, let the silence press in. "You humiliated me in front of everyone," she continued. "My parents, our friends. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Do you?" I asked quietly. She faltered, just for a second. "That wasn't the place to..." "It was exactly the place," I cut in. My voice stayed calm, but I could feel the tension building in my chest. "You spent months lying to my face, smiling at me while sneaking off to be with him. You think I was going to handle that behind closed doors? Not a chance." Her eyes hardened. "So what now? You think this fixes anything? You think this makes you some kind of hero?" I set the glass down and stood, moving toward the doorway. "No, Tessa. It doesn't fix anything. But it ends something, and I'm fine with that." She followed me down the hallway, still talking half defensive, half pleading, but I didn't engage. Instead, I went straight to the guest room and shut the door. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning, she was gone when I came out for coffee. No note, just silence. I checked my phone, 10 missed calls from her and 1 from Blake, which I deleted without opening. By noon, I was sitting in the office of a local attorney I'd quietly researched for the past 2 weeks. Her name was Karen Whitmore Sharp, direct, with the kind of composure that told me she'd seen every ugly version of marriage possible. I laid everything out. The texts, the photos, the hotel records. She didn't flinch. "You've done most of the work already," she said, flipping through the folder. "With this evidence, we can file on grounds of adultery. Given Montana's laws, you'll be in a strong position to retain the house, avoid spousal support, and divide assets favorably." "That's what I want," I said. Karen leaned back. "You're calm. Most people in your situation aren't." I shrugged. "I've been angry for weeks. I just didn't show it." She gave me a small, approving smile. "That restraint will serve you well. I'll start the paperwork today." Leaving her office, I felt lighter. Not happy, and there was nothing to be happy about, but steady. The plan was in motion. That night, Tessa came home. I could hear the hesitation in the way her key turned in the lock. She stepped inside like she was walking into a stranger's house. "We need to talk," she said. I stayed in the kitchen, leaning on the counter. "About what?" "You can't just throw away 10 years like this. We can work on it. We can go to counseling. People make mistakes, Grant." I met her eyes. "People make mistakes. But you didn't make one mistake. You made dozens. Every text, every hotel visit, every lie, you chose them over me. And now I'm choosing me over you." She swallowed hard. "You think you're going to come out of this clean? You think people won't see you as cruel for what you did last night?" "I don't care how they see me," I said. "I care how I see myself. And I'm done seeing a man who lets himself be lied to." Her expression shifted, first anger, then something like resignation. "If that's how you want it," she muttered, and walked down the hall. I didn't stop her. Over the next week, we lived in the same house like strangers. She stayed in the master bedroom. I took the guest room. We barely spoke except to discuss bills or the mail. The tension was thick, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of an argument. Every move was deliberate, measured. One evening, I saw her standing in the driveway, phone to her ear, her voice low and sharp. I didn't have to hear the words to know who she was talking to. The next morning, Karen called. "We're ready to serve her," she said. "Do you want to be present or let the process server handle it?" "I want to be there," I told her. Because as much as the slideshow had been for me, the moment she realized it was legally over, that was going to be mine too. Saturday morning came gray and cold, the kind of Montana winter day where the sky feels like it's pressing down on the rooftops. I'd timed it on purpose. Weekends were when Tessa slept in. The process server, a stocky man in his 50s named Dale, pulled into the driveway at 8:30 sharp. I was already waiting on the porch, coffee in hand. "You sure you want to be here for this?" he asked, flipping open his clipboard. "Yeah," I said. "I want to see her face." We didn't have to wait long. The door creaked open, and Tessa stepped out, wrapped in a robe, hair messy from sleep. She blinked at Dale like she was trying to place him. "Tessa Ellison?" he asked. "Yes." He handed her the thick envelope. "You've been served." The moment her fingers closed around the papers, she froze. Her eyes darted to me, standing just a few feet away. "What is this?" she asked. Though her voice already had that tremor, she knew exactly what it was. "Divorce petition," I said evenly. She tore open the envelope, scanning the first page. "On grounds of adultery?" She read aloud, her tone climbing. "You—" She cut herself off, glancing at Dale, who stood impassively. "Anything else you need from me?" I asked Dale. "Nope. All good here," he said, turning back to his truck. The moment he was gone, Tessa's face shifted. Anger, disbelief, something else underneath. You're really doing this? After humiliating me in front of everyone, you're going to drag me through court? I'm not dragging you anywhere, I said. You made your choices. I'm making mine. She let out a short, bitter laugh. You think you're coming out of this the good guy? You've turned yourself into the villain in half the town's eyes. I sipped my coffee. Maybe. But I can live with that. She stood there for a long moment, gripping the papers like they were burning her hands. Then she turned and walked back inside, letting the doors slam behind her. I stayed outside until I heard her retreat to the bedroom. My heart wasn't pounding this time. There was no adrenaline rush, no sense of triumph, just the quiet confirmation that the road I'd chosen was still the right one. That afternoon, I met with Karen at her office to go over next steps. She'll have 30 days to respond, Karen explained, sliding a pen across the desk for me to sign a few more documents. Given the evidence, I don't anticipate she'll contest the grounds. She might try to fight over property, but we're positioned well. I nodded. I'm not in a hurry. I just want it done right. Karen gave me that measured look again, the one that said she was cataloging my composure for later. Most people in your position can't wait to be free. You're different. Different how? You're playing the long game. That's rare. And it's why I think this will end exactly the way you want it to. When I got home, Tessa's car was gone. She didn't come back until after dark, and when she did, she went straight to the bedroom without a word. I didn't ask where she'd been. I didn't care. The following week passed in near silence. I focused on work, on small tasks around the house, on anything that reminded me life existed outside this crumbling marriage. She, on the other hand, seemed to shrink into her selfless makeup, more time in bed, occasional long showers that left the bathroom fogged for hours. One night, I found her in the kitchen, sitting at the table with the divorce papers spread out in front of her. She looked up, eyes red. Grant, can we at least talk? I pulled out a chair across from her. About what? Her hands fidgeted with the corner of a page. About us. About whether there's anything left to save? I shook my head. There's not. You don't even want to try. You didn't want to try when it mattered, I said. You wanted him. Now you've got nothing. She flinched at that, but didn't deny it. Do you love him? I asked suddenly. Her mouth opened, then closed. It's complicated, she said finally. No, I replied. It's simple. You threw away your marriage for someone you don't even have the courage to say you love. Her eyes glossed again. I made mistakes. You made decisions, I interrupted. Mistakes are when you trip over something. Decisions are when you keep walking toward it, knowing exactly what's there. We sat in silence after that. Eventually, she gathered the papers, pressed them into the envelope, and left the room. A few days later, word started spreading in town. Friends I hadn't heard from in years texted me. Some offered support, others asked if the rumors were true. I didn't give details. I didn't need to. The people who mattered already knew the truth. The rest could believe whatever they wanted. One evening, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a male voice said, "You think you're a big man airing your dirty laundry like that?" "Blake," I said flatly. "You ruined her," he snapped. "No," I said. "She ruined herself. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see." There was a pause on the line, then a muttered curse before he hung up. I set the phone down, a small, grim satisfaction settling in my chest. They could both be angry, They could both hate me, but neither of them could undo what I'd done. The story was out, the papers were served, and the next chapter was already waiting. 2 weeks after she was served, the envelope came back to my mailbox, Tessa's official response, postmarked from her attorney's office in town. I carried it inside without opening it right away, letting it sit on the kitchen counter while I made coffee. Part of me already knew what would be inside. Denials, justifications, maybe a feeble attempt to claw at assets she thought she could still claim. When I finally slid it open, my hunch was mostly right. Her lawyer had worded it carefully, admitting to marital difficulties, but denying the characterization of events as adultery, citing lack of context. It was a laughable dodge, considering the photographs, time-stamped logs, and screenshots that sat neatly in Karen's file. Still, they'd also requested equitable division of assets and a review of spousal support needs, a transparent shot at seeing what they could shake loose. I drove straight to Karen's office. She scanned the pages with a kind of neutral face that made you wonder if she ever reacted to anything. "They're fishing," she said finally, setting the papers down. "They know they don't have a leg to stand on for spousal support given the evidence, but they're hoping to rattle you into a concession." "They're wasting their time," I said. Karen smiled faintly. "That's what I told her lawyer on the phone this morning. I also reminded him that if they want to push this to trial, the full set of exhibits will become part of the public record." I sat back in the chair, picturing Tessa hearing that from her lawyer, imagining the way her stomach must have dropped. She'd survived the slideshow, but a public court file was another beast entirely. Over the next few weeks, the process moved in slow, deliberate steps. We exchanged financial disclosures, appraisals were done on the house, and both sides sent proposals back and forth. Karen handled most of it without needing me in the room, but occasionally she'd call to update me. "They've backed off the spousal support request," she told me one Thursday afternoon. "Now they're focusing on the split of the savings accounts. I've proposed a division that keeps your retirement intact and gives her a smaller cash payout. It's fair, and it saves you a courtroom fight." "That's fine," I said. I didn't want this dragging on any longer than necessary. At home, the tension was suffocating. We still lived under the same roof, a fact that baffled friends when they found out. But in Bozeman's tight housing market, moving out before the divorce was finalized wasn't practical, not when the house itself was one of the biggest assets in play. So we circled each other like uneasy tenants, speaking only when we had to. One night, I came home from work to find her sitting in the living room, the divorce papers and settlement proposals spread out on the coffee table. She looked up at me, her eyes tired. "Is this really how you want it to end?" she asked quietly. "It's how it already ended," I said, hanging up my coat. "We're just putting it on paper now." She exhaled slowly, her shoulders slumping. "I keep thinking, maybe if we'd talked sooner, You could have talked sooner," I interrupted. "Instead, you lied, over and over. There's no rewinding that." For once, she didn't argue. She just gathered the papers into a stack and walked away. A week later, Karen called with the news. "They've accepted the property division. No trial. We can finalize once the judge signs off." It was the outcome I'd hoped for, clean, uncontested, and in my favor. Still, when I hung up the phone, there was no rush of victory. Just a steady, quiet relief. The final hearing was set for a Tuesday morning. It wasn't dramatic. Just me, Karen, Tessa, and her attorney sitting in a small courtroom while the judge reviewed the settlement. Tessa wore a simple gray dress, her hair pulled back, She didn't look at me once. When the judge asked if we both agreed to the terms, she answered yes, in a voice barely above a whisper. Afterward, we stepped out into the crisp Montana air. She lingered for a moment, as if she wanted to say something. But then she just nodded once, turned, and walked toward her car. I watched her go, realizing that for all the damage, for all the lies and the humiliation, I didn't feel hatred anymore. I felt done. That evening, I drove out past the edge of town, where the mountains rose dark against the fading sky. I parked on a ridge I'd found years earlier, back when life felt simpler. Sitting on the hood of my truck, I let the cold air fill my lungs. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from an old friend who'd been at the anniversary dinner. Heard it's official. Proud of you, man. Not everyone has the guts to handle it like you did. I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. It's over. Time to move on. And for the first time in months, I actually believed it. Life after the divorce was quieter than I expected. Not the kind of quiet that gnaws at you, more like the quiet after a storm, when the air smells different. And you can finally hear yourself think again. The house was mine now. The first weekend after the papers were signed, I walked from room to room, taking inventory of what was left. Tessa had taken her clothes, a few pieces of furniture she'd brought into the marriage, and some personal keepsakes. Everything else was still there, but it felt lighter. I boxed up the wedding photos and the framed happy couple shots from vacations. They didn't hurt to look at anymore, but they didn't belong on the walls either. Not in this new version of my life. I stored them in the attic out of sight, not quite ready for the trash. Work kept me busy during the week, but evenings were mine again. I started cooking meals I liked, not just what we'd compromised on over the years. I rebuilt the deck in the backyard, a project I'd been putting off for 3 summers. My hands were blistered by the time it was done. But it felt good, tangible proof that I could still build something from scratch. People in town had their opinions. In a place like Bozeman, gossip moves fast. Some folks went out of their way to tell me they'd always suspected something about Tessa. Others kept their distance, unsure if speaking to me meant taking sides. I didn't try to correct anyone's version of the story. The truth was out there for anyone who wanted it, and I had no interest in reliving the details. One Saturday, I ran into Blake at the hardware store. He was in the next aisle, leaning over a cart with a few random items, paint, rope, a new drill bit. We locked eyes for a second. He gave me a smirk, like he was testing whether I still had anything left to say. I didn't. I walked past him without a word, and for some reason, that seemed to get under his skin more than anything else I'd done. I heard him mutter something under his breath, but I didn't bother catching it. He wasn't my problem anymore. A month later, I got a message from a mutual friend. Blake and Tessa aren't together anymore. No context, no details, just the fact. I felt nothing. Whatever happened between them after I stepped away was their own mess to deal with. Winter thawed into spring, and with it came small, unexpected moments of peace. A fishing trip with my brother out on the Gallatin River. A Sunday afternoon fixing my dad's old pickup in his driveway. Coffee on the porch while the sun rose over the bridgers. One evening, I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through old emails to clean out my inbox, and found the guest list from our anniversary party. It made me pause, not out of pain, but curiosity. I opened the slideshow file, the one I'd used that night, and watched it again. The first half still made me smile. Those were real memories, even if the woman in them was no longer the person I thought she was. The second half, with the hotel photos and texts, felt almost like watching someone else's story. I closed the laptop and sat there in the dim light, realizing something important. I didn't regret what I'd done. Not the slideshow, not serving her in person, not the cold precision of how I'd handled it. It hadn't been about vengeance in the end. It had been about reclaiming my voice in a marriage where I'd been silenced without realizing it. That night, I got a call from my dad. "We're doing a cookout this weekend," he said. "Come by. Bring that new bourbon you keep talking about." I smiled. "I'll be there." The next evening, I stopped by the liquor store to pick up the bottle. As I was checking out, the cashier kid, barely in his 20s, looked up and said, "Hey, you're Grant, right? I was at that anniversary dinner. Man, that was something." I didn't know what to say, so I just shrugged. Had to be done. He grinned. Well, he did it right. Driving home, I realized that was the only validation I needed. Not applause, not pity, just the quiet acknowledgement that I'd handled my own business on my own terms. Later, sitting on the back deck with the bottle open, I poured a glass and let the evening settle around me. The air was cool, the sky streaked with the last gold of sunset. For the first time in a long while, there was no bitterness in my chest, no tightness in my jaw. Just a calm, steady sense that I'd walked through fire and come out the other side intact. I didn't know what the next chapter would look like. Maybe it would be a year of solitude. Maybe I'd meet someone new. Maybe I'd just keep building things with my hands until they felt worn in again. But whatever it was, it would be mine. By the time summer rolled over Bozeman, the divorce felt like something that had happened in another life. The paperwork was filed, the accounts settled, the gossip had found new targets, the storm had passed, and in its place was a strange, welcome stillness. I started hiking again, something I hadn't done much in the last few years. Alone at first, just me and the sound of my boots on dirt trails winding through the Gallatin Range. The rhythm of walking, the smell of pine, the wide sweep of sky. It worked on me in ways I hadn't expected. It was like my mind was finally clearing out the echoes of the last year. On one of those hikes, I stopped at an overlook where the valley spread out below, the Yellowstone River cutting a slow, silver ribbon through it. I sat on a rock, drinking water, thinking about how much had changed, how much I had changed. The truth was, I wasn't the same man who'd stood in that banquet hall with a slideshow clicker in his hand. Back then, I'd been holding on to anger like it was armor. It had gotten me through what needed to be done. But it wasn't something you could wear forever without it becoming a weight. Somewhere along the way, maybe after the settlement was signed, maybe out there on those trails, that armor had started to come off. One Friday night, I was at the grocery store when I saw her. Tessa. She was in the produce aisle, alone, picking through avocados like nothing had ever happened. We made brief eye contact. There was no malice, no smirk, just a flicker of recognition. Then she turned back to the display. I kept walking. We didn't say a word. And that was fine. A year ago, that moment would have been loaded with tension. Now, it was just two people moving through the same small town, each carrying their own history. I didn't need anything from her anymore, not an apology, not an explanation. The chapter was closed. I started spending more time with friends I'd lost touch with during the marriage. Backyard barbecues, weekend fishing trips, even a spur-of-the-moment road trip to Wyoming just to see a concert. Life began to feel like mine again. And not in the way it had before I met Tessa. It was something new, shaped by everything I'd been through. One evening, my brother asked me if I ever regretted handling it the way I did publicly with the slideshow. I thought about it for a long moment before answering. "No," I said finally. It wasn't about embarrassing her. It was about making sure I didn't walk away thinking I'd stayed silent when I should have spoken up. I needed to hear myself tell the truth out loud, with no way to take it back. He nodded, and we didn't talk about it again. Months later, I got a letter from Karen, just a standard closure notice for the case file. I almost tossed it without opening, but something made me slit it open. Inside was a single sentence she'd handwritten at the bottom of the page. "You handled this better than most. Keep going forward." It was such a small thing, but it stayed with me. Not because I needed validation, but because it reminded me that strength doesn't always have to look like a fight. Sometimes it's just refusing to be pulled back into a place you've already left. Now, on quiet evenings, I sit out on the deck with a glass of bourbon and watch the sun sink behind the mountains. The light shifts from gold to pink to deep purple, and the air cools just enough to raise the hair on my arms. It's the kind of view you can't rush, the kind you have to earn by sitting still and letting it happen. I don't know if I'll get married again. I don't even know if I want to. What I do know is that I trust myself more now than I ever did before. I learned that I can walk through betrayal, through humiliation, through the slow grind of legal endings, and still come out whole. Maybe even stronger. Some people think closure is something you get from someone else, a conversation, an apology, an explanation. But I've learned it's something you give yourself. The day I walked out of that banquet hall, I started giving it to myself. One decision at a time. If you've ever been there, if you've ever sat in the quiet after someone you trusted shattered that trust, know this: you can get through it. It won't be quick. It won't be clean. But one day, you'll look around at the life you've built from what's left, and you'll realize you're not just surviving anymore. You're living. And maybe, if you're lucky, you'll even be grateful for the fire you had to walk through to get here. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like and subscribe. You never know who might need to hear it next, and your support helps these stories find them.